Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with another ink smushed card using a bunch of die cuts, specifically the mushroom stems wafer die that I used in a previous video. This time I'm pairing it with the mushroom house, the layered bunny, and then the etched tall leaf wafer die, which I did a video on last year, I think. I forget when that tall leaf came out. It's huge. I only die cut part of it because it'll fit like on a slimline card, but I'm going to do an A2 card. So I die cut all the pieces that I'm going to add ink to from Ranger Distress watercolor paper. And I die cut first because I like to see where I'm adding ink, etc. But you could totally, like, if you're feeling like just you're in a creative slump or you just want to play around but no real, just want to play, you could totally do like ink smush backgrounds or just make backgrounds, watercolor, ink smushing, playing around, all the fun things. And then you can die cut them. That works great. But when I've got somewhat of an idea, I like to die cut first because then I can see everything. So that's what I did. I did all my die cutting, and then I'm just sticking the die cuts to my stick and stamp mat. That just kind of holds everything in place. And then I'm using one of my little stamp storage sleeves, because usually originally with ink smushing is you smush your distress inks or water reactive inks onto like a non-stick craft sheet, and then you press your cardstock in, that sort of a thing, which I still like doing. This just gives control, because you can see I literally can just like press in like little dots here and there, do whatever I want. So with the greenery, I'm doing my like go-to combo with distress colors, which is Twisted Citron and then Rustic Wilderness. This combo for me is like literally chef's kiss. I love it. There's something about like the bright citrusy green with the Twisted Citron and then the deep Rustic Wilderness that together I love. And the Rustic Wilderness, when I smush this onto the little storage sleeve and add the water, and then I'm like, pressing it onto these die cuts, it like, look at it. I love it. I love the texture it creates. This is a fun, messy, anyone can do it technique. Seriously. Because if I can do it, anybody can do it, really, So between, types, I guess, like I took the die cut leaves, I just set them on a hardboard to dry, and then I rinsed this mat off in the sink. When I'm using distress inks, any water-based inks, because people have asked me about that with these stick and stamp mats, I just rinse them under the sink. They're good to go. It removes the ink, whatever's left, like there's staining on there, I don't care. And you let it air dry and it stays sticky. So now for the tops of the mushrooms, I went with purple. The last video I did using these mushroom stem wafer dies, I did blue, and a bunch of you were like, blue? What? Sky's the limit, man. We're just creating our own thing. I don't care if it shows up like this in nature. It's fun. I still want to do like a rainbow of mushrooms, because how cute would that be, But I was in a mood for purple, so that's what I did. So I used two purples. I used Dusty Concord and Villainous Potion. I started with the Villainous Potion, or started with the Dusty Concord, the lighter purple. And then I went in with the Villainous Potion. And when I use my heat tool, because with ink smushing, you need the layers to dry in between. Because otherwise, it's just going to turn into like either a smooth mess or just a blob, If you want that speckly texture layered look, each layer has to dry in between. So I use my heat tool when things are stuck to my stick and stamp mat, but I don't get my heat tool up super close. I'm not heat embossing. I'm just drying. So I keep it moving because the stick and stamp mat is not heat proof. Trust me, I've talked about this in other videos, and I've shown my other stick and stamp mat that I also use to hold my little die cuts. That's all nice and warped because I had a moment and wasn't using my brain. Anyway, I just use my heat tool, or like I showed a second ago, I'll pick up the pieces with my like little reverse tweezers, just depending on the size of the pieces, and just dry them. So that way I can go in and layer, because I don't have the patience to let things sit and air dry. Who does? Anywho, for the bases of these mushrooms, I pounced on some antique linen ink And my little pouncer had some brown ink still on it because I don't bother wiping them off. I'm fine with it. So that was fine. And then I still smushed in a little bit with my storage sleeve and the antique linen ink because it just, that texture, I just love it. If you're not big on embossing pastes and those sorts of ways to add texture, this is a fun way to add texture without actually adding like layers of things or making things thick, or you know what I mean? It just gives it that extra something. So by this point, those leaf die cuts are dry, and I wanted to make them a little more green. There was a lot of white space, which again, it just depends on my mood, depending on the die cuts and what I'm going for. But I wanted these to have a bit more green, but I didn't want to do any more ink smushing on them because I loved how that rustic wilderness especially was just like, it was just perfect, you know? I do. Perfection is overrated. It's totally overrated. But you know, sometimes when things just turn out so nicely and it's like, oh, this is just fabulous. So I just took the Twisted Citron and my little paper pouncer and just pounced ink on top of it. So I'm, you know, kind of filling in those white areas with the lighter green ink, but it's not messing with any of the smushing I did or anything. It's just giving it that little bit of extra color. Again, love. So I did it with that, and then I ended up doing it with the tops of the mushrooms too, because I was quite happy with how that turned out. So with that, I just used the Dusty Concord, so the slightly lighter shade of ink, and same thing. Just pounce that on top of these die cuts, so it just deepens them a little bit, but you can still see all of that splotchy, splattery goodness from the ink smushing. Again, I was having fun. There's just something about mucking around with like die cuts and inks that I really enjoy. And I make quite the mess doing it, and I'm just content, you know. I'm just rolling around on my craft desk, like smushing things and die cutting things and adding ink and all the things. So for the underside, this is basically the undersides of the mushroom die cuts. I pounced on a little bit of that antique linen, just a bit. And then I took Lost Shadow Distress ink, put that on the sleeve, and like smushed that onto the sleeve, sprayed a little bit of water, and then added that to these. Again, the combo, I don't know. There's something about this combo that I'm really enjoying. Antique linen and Lost Shadow together. Would never think of a neutral combo that I just like. I love. You guys know I tend towards, you know, the rainbow colors, the bright colors, etc. I'm not super big on the grunge. I love grunge and the look of grunge and all those things. It's just not my thing. But so every once in a while, you know, certain things. So antique linen and Lost Shadow together, love it. So I kept that in mind for the bunny. This is the layered bunny wafer die. He's unbelievably adorable. So same thing, I die cut him from distress watercolor paper. And then I've got kind of the main portions of him on my stick and stamp mat here. And I'm going to start with Lost Shadow, so just a light gray. And I'm going to use that as well on, this will be his little tummy. So I add just a little bit of the Lost Shadow to that, so it's not just flat white. And I do the same thing to what will be the very like tip of his face. Added just a little bit of Lost Shadow. So then the other parts, I add more of the Lost Shadow. Then I go in with a little bit of hickory smoke just to darken it up a little bit. Just kind of pouncing on that color there. And then I'm also going to add some of the antique linen. Because I don't know, there's just something that it just kind of warms up the grays and it just gives it that little extra something. So I added a bit of that. And then I'm going to add a little bit of ink smushing, but not a ton. I wanted to give, you know, just that little bit to this, but I didn't want the entire bunny to be ink smushed like all the other background elements. So I took a bit of the hickory smoke, smushed that onto the sleeve, added a little bit of water, and then just added just a bit. And this is, of course, again, where it comes in really handy, having either a sleeve like this or a piece of, you know, acetate or packaging, just anything kind of bit flexible, really. I think I might even have done videos way back in the day. I can't even remember. Using like a Ziploc bag. That would work too. You know, any of those sorts of things. So added the little bit of ink smushing to him. And then for the eyes, I just used a Copic marker. So the W10, just a really, really dark gray Copic marker I'm going to use for that. For the insides of his ears, I used a Kitsch Flamingo. And I just pounced that on with the paper pouncer. I wasn't going to do any like ink smushing. They're such small little pieces that there was no point. So added that little bit of pink. And then for the eyes, Copic marker. So there's one die cut like individual piece for the eyes, and then the other one is actually the base that you glue everything to, which you'll see when I assemble this little guy. So I just quickly colored that in, and then on the base portion where you will see the other eye, because like it's the way like the head is tilted. So added that with Copic marker, quick and simple. Assembling him, super easy. There's some score lines on these die cuts plus the packaging to follow. It's simple. So you just adhere his little tummy, and then the face pieces, you've got the base here, and then you add on this second largest piece. So I'm adhering everything together with craft tacky glue. So get that adhered into place, and then I can stick the little inner portions of his ears and that eye there, and now you can see on the right there where that the other little eye is from the base. So added those together. And then for his little nose, I was going to leave that piece as is because like I just added that little bit of lost shadow with the paper pouncer, but it's like his nose needs just a little bit of color. I was going to do just a Copic marker, but I'm like, wait, I've got Kitsch Flamingo ink sitting here, and I have these teeny tiny blending brushes. I've shown these in a bunch of videos. The waffle flower size 0 shader brushes. It's just tiny. Was perfect. So I just dabbed that in the Kitsch Flamingo ink and then just added that to his little nose, and he's just so cute. So then I can adhere the front portion of his face. So now you see his cute little face, and then you just adhere him to the body, and then you add his 2 little feet, and he's done. Like seriously, like come on now. So super simple, like I said, to adhere. And there is a little score line on the front as well for one of the feet, and then you just add the other one and you're good to go. So I adhered all that together, and then I just put some acrylic blocks on top just to hold everything down for a couple minutes while the glue has a chance to dry. And then everything else, it's pretty simple. The mushroom house, you just adhere the top to the underside, like so, and then you adhere the little base, and then you've got your little mushroom house. I use this more for this card. It's more just nice, a larger mushroom. Didn't worry about like the door or anything like that. You're not even going to see it because the bunny's going to go in front of it. But yeah, I have other ideas for these. I don't know. This is my current fixation. The whole carrots obsession that like, all the brands and home decor with carrots. I'm here for it. Don't ask me why. I like it. It's weird. I know. And mushrooms. So yeah, I'm here for these two. There's something about them. So the mushroom stems, super simple to adhere. I did the large and the medium one, kind of purposely adhered them a little wonky because why not? And then same thing, just stuck them under acrylic blocks. And then for my background, I kept the background simple because all of these wafer dies are basically going to cover the background. So I wasn't going to bother, like, I thought about it. I was like, ooh, stamping, stenciling, like doing some mixed media goodness, which I very much enjoy doing when I do that sort of mixed media thing. But I knew in this case, you wouldn't see it anyway. So I kept it simple. So I used Salvage Patina Distress Ink, and I pounced that on. Just very light, wasn't worried about getting a perfect blend. This is more to just kind of lay down a little bit more color. I did the same thing with some Vintage Photo and like pounced a little bit of that on. And then I'll do some ink smushing. So I put the Salvage Patina onto the storage sheet and then spray that with water, smush that all over this background. So there I get the texture and splattery goodness of it all. Quickly dried that with my heat tool, and then used the Vintage Photo Distress Ink to add a bit more color, texture, splatter, wonderfulness. And that was my background. because again, once everything's adhered to this, you're not going to see very much of it. So this just gives it some color, some texture, you know, fun little things like so. So same thing, smushed all that on, dried that with my heat tool. And then for my sentiments, I kept it easy and simple because again, all the die cuts are basically taking up the entire card. So I'm using some of the Somebody sentiment strips that Simon released, and I trim these down just with my paper trimmer. And once I've got them trimmed down, I was going to leave them as is, but then, as always, adding more color wins out. So I'm just going to add a bit of that dusty CONCORD ink with the paper pouncer just to give them a little bit of color, but not a ton. You know, just a little bit. So I used a very light pressure and just tap that onto these pieces so that they're not just stark white. So you can also foil these if you've got like a laminator or a mink machine, and toner reactive foils like deco foil, etc. That for me, I still get a hit and a miss with that. And for a card like this, I wouldn't anyway, because I got a lot going on with just all the die cut elements and the texture, etc. So adding a little bit of ink was more than enough for me this time. You guys know, usually I'll make up for it in the next card and I'll add like everything but the kitchen sink. But anywho, I adhered my background to the card base. The card base is a top folding A2 white note card. So I adhered the background, and then I start adhering all of my little die cut elements. And now you can see how like this takes up, I'm covering the whole card with my little scene here. So added my little mushroom house, and then one of the mushroom stems, and then I had adhered the other greenery here. So got that into place. I put that on top on purpose so that it would show a little bit more, because again, I love that rustic wilderness green. Just, it gives life. So adhered my other little mushroom. Got him into place, stuck it all under my Misty for a minute or two to let all that glue dry. Then I flipped over the card base to trim off anything that was hanging over the edge. And then to adhere the first part of the sentiment, I just used some little foam squares to even out the part that hangs over, because with all the layers of those die cuts, there's a fair bit of dimension. So thicker foam squares on one end, the little thin foam squares on the rest of it. Pop that into place, and then on the inside of the card, I'm going to put the Somebody Loves You. So cute, so punny, love. And then the little mushroom, I decided I was going to stick that on the inside just to finish it off. And then of course I had matching bling. How could I not? I've got these Pink Fresh Studio Amethyst glitter drops, literally perfect match. They just, yeah. You know, sometimes I have to dig through my stash a little bit to match the colors. These just matched with the mushroom tops perfectly. Was totally meant to be. So I adhered those into place with dabs of craft tacky glue. Once these are adhered, this card is complete. I had a load of fun making this. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. And as always, thank you tons for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, all the good things. I very much appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd appreciate that as well. And then, of course, for all the supplies that I have used, I will have a link below the video in the description box. I'll link to my blog post. There'll be picture links to the supplies in the blog post. There'll be a supply list below as well. You can check that all out if you're interested. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.